You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers about hikers for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi guys, and welcome back to the show. This is Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis, and I am your host, the aforementioned Mighty Blue, or Steve Adams. Each week we try to bring you somebody new who can tell you their personal story on usually the Appalachian Trail. I'll talk to anybody who's gone on a long walk. For me, the great thing about doing this show is that it proves that literally everybody who's done this has a different story, even if they've spent time hiking with previous guests. It's actually one of the reasons I went again in 2019, because my podcast has shown me that all of our journeys are different, and I knew that I had to have a different hike to the one I had in 2014. So a few weeks ago, we had Togs and Lucky, a couple of great people who found each other on the trail, and a tramily that was so tight that I wanted to talk with another member of that tramily. So this week we have Catmando, or JC Van Etten. We heard about JC from Togs and Lucky, but we didn't hear from him, so he will be along shortly. We've also got Phoenix back on, and this week, frankly, she's struggling a bit. I hope she pushes through, but she makes a really interesting observation on the terrain that one encounters if one decides to do a flip-flop and start at Harper's Ferry. I hadn't really thought about it, but it certainly made me think. Phoenix, or Kate, will be on after JC. Now, you may have thought that Grandma Gatewood's journey was over after she summited Katahdin last week. Certainly not. There are still 4 chapters to go, though this week and next week are both fairly short chapters. Today we hear her immediate aftermath and a growing celebrity. So let's get on with it and listen to JC Van Etten, or Catmando. I'd like to introduce you to somebody who you've kind of already met on the show. This is JC Van Etten, or Catmando. Hi JC, how are you?
Great. How you doing, Steve?
I'm not too bad. And the reason I say that we've kind of met him, he not only was mentioned many times in Togs and Lucky's interview a few weeks ago, but he also won the 6-book giveaway in our recent competition. And isn't that shelter book great?
It's amazing. I literally had it in my Amazon Prime shopping cart. I was all set to buy it. You announced it, and I'm like, oh, okay. I finally won something. And it's an amazing book. I love it. Sarah did a great job.
Yes, she did. And funny enough, I've looked at it again quite regularly, actually, and I look at it and I think it takes me back to that shelter when I was there. And I know that you, when you were on the trail last year, you stayed in a lot of shelters, rather, didn't you? You didn't stay in your tent that much. What was it about the shelters that appealed to you?
Well, it's kind of funny because initially the 2 things I said on the trail that I wouldn't do was stay in shelters and then team up with, a bunch of people. I would just be solo. And of course, the first night was a shelter, and that happened for so many nights because I started February 17th, and the first 2 weeks of the trail, I had a little over 11 inches of rain. So the prospect of setting my tent up in the rain, getting some of my gear wet, putting a wet tent in my pack just wasn't appealing. And also the fact that it's that early, there's really no mice problem, and there's room enough for everybody. So it just kind of worked out in that kind of hypothermic type weather to just be a shelter dweller. And we just stayed with it.
Did you get quite comfortable in there?
I really did. My mentor who hiked the trail the year before, Maverick, he gave me a tip. He said, always sleep with your head out. If you sleep with your head towards the back of the wall, the mice will run over your face.
I know.
And so 9 times out of 10, I was the oddball with my head out and everybody else had their head in.
Yes.
So, but I never had any problems. I got real comfortable, almost too comfortable. I think I tented it maybe 14 times the whole trail.
Wow. It's funny, actually. I think there's a mindset you get into, certainly for me anyway. I loved being in my tent, and I was comfortable in my tent always. And in the shelters, I just thought it was always, I'm just so aware that I snore.
Yeah.
So, I didn't really want to just upset everybody, all night long by making so much noise, because some of the times I did stay in a shelter rather, I could hear someone snoring as badly as me. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this must be terrible when I fall asleep. Anyway, let's go back to the days. And by the way, I mentioned this to you just before we started recording. I do have some questions that Togs and Lucky have paid you back as you had some questions for them, as RD as well. So, so we'll come to those if we've got time later, because there's tons of them as well.
I'm sure.
But first, let's go back to the days when you didn't know this incredibly tight group of people. Mm-hmm. What were you doing out on the AT last year? Had it been a long time in the making, or was it kind of an impulse?
It was 42 years in the making. When I was 14 or 15, we camped along the Blue Ridge Parkway, and I saw a couple young people with backpacks. I asked them what they were doing, and from that point on, I said, that's an adventure that I am going to do in this lifetime. I just didn't know when that would happen, and I got out of high school, went to college, went to work, married my sweetheart, and we did some traveling, a lot of hiking, and started a family, and life got in the way, with houses and cars and everything else. And fortunately, I had a plan to retire early and to get a lot of hiking in before my days are over. So I just waited.
You were a hiker anyway. Had you done any long trails before you went out?
No long trails. Lots of day hikes. I did some lot of small backpack trips in the backcountry of Colorado. Hiked the Sierras, the Catskills, the Adirondacks, the Green Mountains. A little bit of everything, kind of all over the country, even in Alaska. But it was all short term. This was first long term through hike.
But that still burned within you to do this.
Oh, absolutely. It never left my mind, and I would hear a story and I'd be like, there it is, and I want to, then I'd be like, I'm definitely committing, having a plan. And I did. I was retired a little over a year. And that whole year I just trained for the trail.
And you mentioned a mentor earlier on. Did he get you training, and did the training that you did it work for you on the trail? Or did you feel like me, the moment you get there, it all goes out the window?
No. My mentor is a friend of a friend. I didn't know him. He was from Tampa, so he's 3 hours to the west of me. Contacted him while he was on the trail and followed him on Facebook and Instagram. And he's like, fire any questions away. And I said, not at all. You enjoy this trail. I'll download your brain when you complete it. So I met him in November before I started my hike. Brought my pack. He gave me a shakedown. And never met him in person. And I mean, what a great guy. And just like anybody who hikes a trail, you want to give back and you want to help future hikers. So he was very helpful. He wanted to know what my physical routine was. And he told me I needed to do more weightlifting. So I started to do that. But by the time I met him, I was already biking 20 miles a day, hiking 14 with a loaded backpack when I wasn't biking. So then I added the gym component and yoga. So by the time my 55-year-old body hit the trail, I had no doubt I could do, 14-mile day. But as you know, when you live in Florida, you're not stressing your cardio. There's no hills unless you go to the landfill or a bridge. So what I did to compensate for that is I did a lot of wind sprints on my bike. And I would go to a park and I would run up and down the stairs, or I would just time myself. One hike I do quite often, it's a little over 7 miles. And with a full pack, I try to do the entire thing in under 2 hours, which I can do.
Wow.
So that gives you,
you must be a very fit guy. You're in your mid-50s.
Yeah, 56 now. Yep.
Was this guy, this mentor, he's Maverick, you say it is?
Yeah, Maverick.
He was on the trail, done the trail himself. Did he give you any tips that surprised you? And then when you got out there, you realized, that's what that was about?
Not really. I mean, I think I did so much research and read so many books. I probably read 16 or 17 books, watched a lot of YouTube. So there wasn't really too many surprises. Everybody has a different experience. If you start a day after someone or, the day before, anything could happen.
Sure.
So a lot of things he relayed to me were his own personal experiences that I didn't experience. But he also gave me a lot of invaluable information on, must see, must do stops, like the Belleville Creamery, do a work for stay at one of the huts, Standing Bear. These are all iconic things that can't be missed. And I'm glad I listened to them because they were amazing.
Yeah, it does help you having those little nuggets of information out there, I must
Absolutely.
say. And going the second time, I knew sort of things I wanted to look for, so it was quite useful for me to have done that. So you say you retired. You didn't retire to do the hike, did you? Retire just because you worked out you were able to? Fine.
Yeah.
So what was your family's reaction when you said you were going to do it, or did they already know you were going to do this?
Yeah, because it's been so long in the making. They knew that it's just a matter of time. Dad gets done with work and he's cutting loose doing a lot of adventures. It's in my nature, and so no surprise. And it's funny reading books where you see people announce what they're going to do, and their friends think they're crazy. My friends are just shaking their head. Yeah, that's what we'd expect you to do. And you're going to make it unless something physically happens to you. So there wasn't even a doubt, So I'm certified, I guess.
What about mentally though? Because I don't know whether you agree. You obviously prepared dramatically in terms of physical preparation, and as people know, I didn't do any at all. So you had all that preparation physically.
Right.
How do you think now you've done it? How do you think you can prepare mentally?
Well, I mean, in my research, the mental aspect of the hike is huge. I knew I was ready physically, and I was confident mentally I was ready. I wrote lists of goals and objectives, and I've worked outside my whole life. So when it's raining and miserable, that's sometimes my regular week at work. So I'm not dismayed by that. That's just, it is what it is. So I think that kind of attitude, and having worked outside with black flies and mosquitoes, and they're just little minor inconveniences. And I think, when you have that background, when you hike, it's part of the hike. I never even wore a head net. It's like whatever. No, it's like whatever.
I had to have one as a tear. And you've been married for over 30 years. You said you married just after you married young. And that, so it must have been tough on you though to leave those responsibilities and your family for 6 months. Was that quite an emotional separation, or was that something because you were prepared for it, you were ready for it?
Yeah, life has prepared us. In the winter, my wife has some health issues, so that's what led us to Florida from upstate New York. Right. And so she spent the first 3 winters down here alone in a condo we bought. And so we're used to that kind of natural separation, and and so, this is going to be a little bit longer. But also I had planned a break halfway because our youngest daughter that had lived with us, she was finishing graduate school. So she was graduating a day or two before Mother's Day. So I came off the trail because I wasn't going to miss her graduation. Yes. And we celebrated Mother's Day. So I was off for 7 days and I got right back on. So that kind of broke it up nicely, so that it was almost halfway. It was actually, I was 15 miles from New Jersey border at that point.
I did this. Well, I didn't do the same in 2014. I got off the trail for a week in 2014 because I was injured.
Right.
Was it? How do you feel that interrupted the rhythm of your hike, or did you just get straight back into it without any problem?
Oh, I was certainly concerned that it would, and so I vowed to eat as much as I could and continue to exercise, continue to bike, continue to backpack.
Oh, wow.
But my wife had other plans, so I did none of that. I didn't even eat, which is strange because,
did she have a honey-do list for you?
Yeah, and she was in the middle of buying another condo because that's what I do is I lease them out. And so it was just a whirlwind. I was running around, and on the 7th day, I got in a truck and drove 17 hours back to a friend's house so I could jump on the trail. So I was concerned physically I was going to be behind the 8 ball, but it's like riding a bike. It was, I did, I think 16 miles the first day and then 22 the second, and then stayed in the mid 20s right after that. And I hiked from finished up Pennsylvania, and I hiked all the way to middle of Vermont before I took a 0.
Wow.
So
you were really hauling ass, as I say.
Oh, yeah.
And when we spoke before, and my notes are a bit muddled here, you told me that you met a hiker on the first day back, and there was a story about that. Tell me about somebody you met on the first day back.
So the first day back, I'm going up Wind Gap, and not even maybe 2 miles going up the steep hill. I had just left 80 degrees sunny Florida. It's the next day. It's 45 degrees and raining, and I'm hiking along and I hear trekking poles. And so oddly enough, I've only been passed up to that point 3 times on the trail, and I turn around and it's RD. and who is resident daddy. So I stopped. I said, he's going to pass me anyway. I might as well just, wait for him. And so he comes up and he's like, "Are you through hiking?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, I am." And he's like, "What's your name?" I go, "Catmando." And he just kind of bend over and, praises me and goes, "I've been trying to catch you for the longest time. At one point we were 10 miles away." And he goes, "I don't know what happened." And then I laughed and jokingly said, "Well, it took, I took off 7 days, so that's why you caught me." But the truth is, when we got to Virginia, we put on the afterburners and we did 190 miles in 1 week. And that really separated us from anybody behind us
in a week
or in front of us in a week.
Oh my gosh.
We called it a weekathon, where we hiked a marathon or more a day.
Right. They did that. Togs and Lucky took that. How did you cope? You cope with that? No problem at all?
No, my feet basically fell apart. I had so much tape on my feet. I think that was the only thing holding them together. So they were in perfect shape to hit Pennsylvania a little bit later on.
Oh, dear.
But basically, I did fine. But I hadn't got a blister for the first 500 miles, and all of a sudden, I had blisters underneath my calluses. So I had, fortunately, none of us are squeamish. So my friends were doing surgery on my feet.
Nice.
But, we just sucked it up and, went on with it.
Now, before we go on, I know that, and I don't know whether you did this before you went out there or you set it up or you started arranging it when you were out there. I know that you tried to raise some money for an organization through your hike. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that.
Yeah, this is a great organization my wife actually found, and it's called Paws of War. It's headquartered out of New York, and there's a Florida branch, a Florida chapter, and Palm Coast that we're very much involved with. Initially, I was blogging and I was doing Instagram and Facebook, so I knew I would have some exposure. Plus, I did some radio interviews. So I figured this would be great exposure. We could help them out. We first started with them. They had a website where you could send a check, so we got them into PayPal, and now we got them into Network for Good. And the exposure really helped out. They ended up getting tens of thousands of dollars, and it's something now we're both involved with. We're both on the board. And this is a program where they take shelter dogs that would normally be, if they're not rehomed, they're going to be killed. And we train them. We test them for their aptitude, their capabilities, how they are with other animals and people, and then we train them in either veterans, first responders, or law enforcement, firemen, and that typically suffer from PTSD or TBI or anything that's really really giving them a hard time to function everyday activities. And we train them and the dog. Everything is free to these folks. The dogs are free adoption, veterinarian bills we pay for, in some instances food. And we train 1 to 2 nights a week, which is also free, until the dogs are fully certified. Some are unbelievable. They'll do it in 4 or 5 months. Some might take a year. And then it's such a sense of community. Even if the dog and the handler are fully certified, they'll often come back almost every week just for that camaraderie, extra training. And to see what these dogs do in the lives of these folks is all worth it. It's amazing what a dog will do. And then the inherent ability that some of these dogs have, and these are just run-of-the-mill dogs. We have dogs that can sense a seizure, a heart attack, stress, and they'll head it off. And it's just unbelievably amazing. It's the most gratifying work I've done in my life, both my wife and myself.
That is very cool. But it's not so much you didn't necessarily need to make the hike for that, but to have done the hike and have benefited that cause is a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great opportunity. I looked at it as an opportunity, and I said, let's do something.
So you've been a hiker for quite a bit of your life. Did you make any, I know you had this mentored and you read a lot of stuff on that. Did you find, what difference did you need to add to your gear and take away from your gear when you were doing a thing of a through hike as opposed to the sort of hiking you've been doing before?
Well, I never really had appropriate gear. I had the sleeping bag I would normally have, you wouldn't take on a hike. It's just bulky. And, so I never really had anything that was, appropriate. Even though I carried a heavy pack, I didn't have a good pack. I had the old, external frame. So, I kind of upped my game and got kind of everything that's new and great and light, fairly lightweight. I wasn't too overly concerned with weight.
What was your pack when you weighed it at Springer?
43 pounds.
That's a lot, though, isn't it? Oh my gosh, that was mine was 42 first time. The second time it was 27. So it shows you how much you can lose, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Did you finish with 42 pounds as well?
You're going to laugh. I did. And I thought when I came home, I changed out all my winter gear. I got rid of my crampons as soon as I hit Virginia because the weather had changed. I got rid of some other cold gear, but I changed to a lighter sleeping bag. But I think what happened was I was so hungry all the time. I could remember getting up at 1:30 in the morning, 2 o'clock, because I needed a snack. And that's after losing 35 pounds. I was constantly hungry. I couldn't get enough food no matter what I did. So.
That's amazing. So you said you were looking to stay solo, but you met up with the tramily, and you obviously got very, very tight. Do you think, and I've thought about this a few times actually, do you think that you give up certain things when you stop being a solo hiker? You become part of a group. Obviously, you make choices. There are benefits to both. Do you think you give up certain things when you stop being a solo hiker?
Absolutely. Because everything's a compromise. You want to listen to your body. Your body might say, 15 miles would be good today. And everybody's going, but we could be here at 22 or 23 miles. So, you either buy into that or you don't. And, we would have discussions and, we tried to be as honest as we can. But a lot of times I think because we were predominantly men, our egos got in the way. So we'd be like, we'll do 35 miles today. It's all right. And,
How did Togs take to all that then?
Oh, she's a trooper. I'll tell you what, she, endurance wise, between her and RD, she definitely was the most badass hiker of our group.
Oh, really?
I mean, she did 70 miles in 2 days. I was literally 10 miles behind her in New Jersey saying, Togs, I'll catch you. And she put the afterburners on. I said, Togs, I'll see you in New Hampshire somewhere. It's just, there was no way. I knew I physically couldn't catch her.
And you were the oldest in the family, but obviously very fit.
Yep.
In your life before the trail,
right?
Because you obviously did relate to these youngsters. How different do you feel that is, the way in which we relate to youngsters on the trail as opposed to perhaps we don't in so-called real life?
Sure, I kind of thought it would be a problem, because I came from the green industry. I had greenhouses, landscape management, a lot of grounds management type of work, and it was rare to find young people with work ethic that enjoyed overtime, looked for, a good physical challenge.
Sure.
There was always, I would always find some, but, very few. So that was one of the things coming into hike is my goal was to be able to relate more to younger people.
Oh, really?
Because sometimes I have a difficulty with that because, I'm so work oriented, I kind of value everybody on how they work. And, so I'm like, I got to kind of change the way I'm thinking. And, the whole goal is to make a better version of myself and understanding people. So.
Interesting. Isn't that interesting? So you were open to that change then anyway?
Absolutely.
And did you find them a revelation? Because everybody knows that I did. I find the youngsters I met were an absolute revelation.
Yeah, I did. But then I also took a step back and said, you know what, we're kind of all, everybody's different, but we all kind of have that same drive and that same goal. So there's a lot of commonality with the people on the trail. So even though we might have major differences elsewhere, when you're on the trail, that's the beauty of the trail is we're all coming together. We want to help everybody.
Yeah.
And we have similar, attitudes and aptitudes, as that relates.
And you were able to catch up with some of the tramily, but I know that Togs and Lucky didn't finish with you guys.
Yeah.
So because you were such a tight group, what was your feeling as you got to, I don't know, say Abel Bridge, and you knew that the end was in sight because it's all coming to an end? There's a sadness as well as a happiness, isn't there?
There absolutely.
Or did you just want to get home by then? Were you done by then?
Well, all the above. I was done by then. I wanted to keep going. I wanted to stop. But I think really what happened was Lucky and Togs got sick by Gorham. Lucky got sick shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
And, but because they're both incredible hikers, we're like, they're going to catch us. And, I don't think any of us put that in our mind with doubts that it would happen. And then it became apparent that they weren't gonna. We had set a date because we had a lot of family and friends from out of state, out of town, meeting us in Maine. So we committed, and we added a buffer, but that buffer was deteriorating really fast. So by the time we hit Maine, we were all teary-eyed because we were such a tight group, and we were wondering, are we going to feel complete finishing this hike with two of our tramily not with us? But at that time, we kind of suspected they were a couple, which was later confirmed by Fresh Grounds. So we though we felt bad, we're like, well, they have each other. Yeah. And then, and then we stayed in contact, and they did come and see us in Monson at Shaw's. And that was kind of our last reunion before we hit the 100-mile wilderness. And we stayed in touch. We knew when they summited, and then we've seen each other since. But it was that was very bittersweet because, you felt like, we're finished, but we're not really finished as a tramily because two of us, are still on the trail. Yeah. So that was tough.
That's nice. Yeah. But that moment you touch the sign, it's still, you think about it every day, don't you? I do anyway. And there's something about just touching that sign. And when especially if you go up on a decent day, did you summit on a decent day?
Man, we had a great day for everything. We had a great day for Mount Washington. We had a great day for Mahoosuc Notch. I mean, a lot of the iconic spots on the trail, we had the best day ever. Of course, getting to Katahdin, we didn't see it until Rainbow Ledges because the weather was lousy prior to that. But, it is what it is. But at Rainbow Ledges, that's the first we saw it. And Katahdin was just picture perfect that day.
And it takes your breath away, doesn't it? Just takes your breath away.
So we're at Rainbow Ledges. I've always been kind of in the middle of the pack, towards the front of the pack. I come up to Rainbow Ledges, farmers sitting there, RD sitting there. They're about 5 feet apart, tears rolling down their face. And I didn't even have to look up. I knew what it was. And I dropped my pack, sat between them. I did the same thing they did, and we just took in Katahdin. Here's something we've been chasing since February. It was just totally amazing. RD said, all we have to do is see a moose now, and I'm done. I'll just quit the hike right now. So we laugh, and then we hear a twig break, and we're like, what was that? And then I thought, it was a joke. And out steps a bull moose into the clearing. Of course and he's like, I'm not quitting.
Of course it did.
That was definitely a special moment. And then Frozen came, and he didn't see the moose, so he was a little upset. So I tried calling the moose in, and the moose came in, but he couldn't get a good picture of him. So.
That is so cool. So, and being such a tight family, when you finished, you touched the sign, you all went different directions, you went home and so on. How were you when you returned home? Did you get the old post-trail thingy, depression or not?
I definitely did. So, so my wife immersed me into work, and I would.
It sounds like she does that all the time. Yeah.
There's a theme there. But no, we pretty much continue to communicate. We do every day. There's maybe seriously 10 days have gone by since we summited in July 3rd that we haven't spoken to each other.
Wow.
So, even with Togs and Lucky in Australia, we were going back and forth last night together. Very tight group. Frozen and Chrissy. Frozen proposed to his now wife on Katahdin.
Nice.
We all went to the wedding in Pittsburgh in February. Everybody made it. So now we plan on definitely seeing each other, but I think hikes right now, nothing's scheduled. Everybody, their lives are taking them one way or the other, which is great to see because it's all good.
But you're planning on the PCT, aren't you?
My goal is the PCT next March, starting it.
And are you going to start it by yourself?
Yes.
All right. Interesting. Yep. That'd be interesting to see how different that is because you were such a tramily too. But you never know. You'll start meeting some people there as well.
Oh, sure. I have, after this experience, I have no doubt. And I have a fun one coming up in August. Maverick, who I've never hiked with before, him and I are going to do the long trail.
Oh, nice.
So nice. We're really excited about it. So that gives me, pause to, focus on training again and getting back into shape.
Right.
So.
Well, look, I've saved a little bit of time at the end for some questions from Togs and Lucky, but I want to first of all tell you, and I think you said something nice about them, but they've absolutely returned it. She wrote, our thoughts on Cat. He is a superhuman, the next stage of human evolution. The wisest cat in the forest, always there with the scientific name for a plant and the sage wisdom of a great man. Dearly devoted husband whose love shone through his words and actions. Our lifelong friend whom we both adore. My God, you guys must have been close.
We really were. I mean, we gelled so well. We had so much fun.
That's amazing. Right.
Yeah.
Let me get the questions.
Yes.
And then this is a quick answer, really. How many blazes did you touch and how many did you miss?
If I missed it, I didn't see it.
Excellent.
And they were all white.
Quite right, too. Yeah. Can you tell me about the cat stretches?
The cat scratches.
No, stretches.
Oh, stretches. Oh, yeah. So because of my age and the shape I'm in great shape, I feel, but I have a lot of physical problems, arthritis in my back, compressed discs and bone spurs.
Oh,
so not because it's something I like to do. I have to start the day with at least a half hour worth of stretches. So I do a lot of yoga poses, and it's funny because people would go, that's a great idea, either at the end of the day, the beginning, or the beginning of the day, but nobody would do it. They would just say, that's a great idea. I should be stretching more. So I would always stretch on my footprint, my tent, so my piece of Tyvek, I would stretch in the shelter or do it on the ground. And,
cool.
I'm sure I got some looks, but it didn't really bother me.
It probably worked for you, no doubt.
No.
Now, what do you think your family would say is your worst trait? And there's a hint, it's at night.
Oh, I know exactly what it is. And you started the segue by going, I didn't sleep in shelters because I snore like a lumberjack. I snore like a lumberjack, and it's a double threat because it takes me on average about 2 minutes to go to sleep. So you're never going to beat me to sleep. I apologize to everybody out there I've kept awake.
I think the worst snorers do that. They fall asleep quickly and start snoring, don't they? Terrible, isn't it?
Yep.
Who had the heaviest pack in the group and why? Well, that must be you, mustn't it?
Well, it kind of went back and forth. Sometimes it was Lucky.
Oh, wow.
And they would pick on us. And, I would joke with them that, I do my yoga in the morning, but I also have barbells in my pack for, to work on my upper body. So,
Well, that actually gives a bit of a clue, actually, to the next question, because Lucky said, and I didn't even realize the second bit of this, Lucky says to talk about, where's my bear rope? And the other one was, ow, my hernia.
So that was all right. I'm trying to think what shelter that was, but we had run into Pork Chop and Wolfman in this shelter, and it was unbelievably windy. And it was one of those lovely shelters where after 18, 19-mile day, you have to plummet down the side of the mountain to get water. I want to say it was in Tennessee. In any event, Frozen was with us, and he was going to set his hammock up behind the shelter because of the windbreak. And he asked Pork Chop, hey, what's with this rope? And he's like, I don't know, you can use it. So he was using it to help fashion his hammock. And then Wolfman came out and went, what are you doing with my bear rope? And it was that's how he talked. And it was only Lucky can imitate him, but it was so funny. So Frozen's like, I'm sorry, I had asked. So he took it down and he headed down the mountain, which was the smartest move to get some kind of shelter from the wind, because it would have been a crazy night in a hammock.
And what about the hernia?
And that was Wolfman. He had the hernia.
All right.
And he's like, he's pushing it back in. He's like, I'll be all right. I don't want to tell my wife. She'll pull me off the trail. And we're like, you really ought to have that looked at. No, I'll be okay. And he might have had like an 80-pound pack. He had this crazy pack. Dude. But he was a trail character, as as we all have met.
And the last question from Togs and Lucky was, ask him if he's the half-gallon challenge champion.
Yes, I am. But only in our group.
All right.
I was dismayed to go in and see that somebody did it in 5 minutes.
5?
Unless they had a jacket, 5 minutes, 5.5 minutes.
I did 27 the first time, and I thought that was pretty good.
I figured I could do it in 15, but the ice cream was so darn hard. I think I did it in 23 or 24 minutes. But I was a little disappointed because it was so darn hard. It took forever, but that also was one of the highlights of the trip. We came into Pine Furnace. Yeah. There was a group of Boy Scouts with their leaders, and when we rounded the turn, they gave us a standing ovation, and it was amazing. That was just so humbling. We went inside. We went to pay for the ice cream, and the lady's like, "Your money's not good here. The Boy Scouts bought your ice cream." Oh. And then they came around us and cheered us the whole time while we were eating the ice cream.
Isn't that was awesome?
The neatest thing. We kept in touch. A couple of the leaders followed me on Instagram, and then Frozen actually went in Pennsylvania and gave a talk to the scout troop about through hiking the AT, which, I mean, full circle. Was absolutely amazing.
That is so nice. But actually, I'm now going to move on to RD's questions. Some of these are a bit more serious, actually, in some way.
Okay.
But can you tell everyone about the time you helped save the AT in New York from a bunch of wild high school kids?
Okay. It was actually a team effort. So we were in New York, and a farmer and I were kind of hiking in close proximity, which is unusual because usually we're pretty well gapped apart. And our good buddy Swede, he was behind us, and we came across 3 young people, seemed like really nice kids, a male and 2 females. And the female had a sign that said a prom proposal. So we were joking with them and, laughing. And we were on top of a mountain, and we started going down. We got about a half a mile from them, and we started seeing vandalism everywhere, spray paint on trees and rocks.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was just, we got really upset. Then we found, and farmer was, as vocal as I was about it. And I said, well, maybe it's chalk paint. That paint will, break down in time. And then we found 2 cans of enamel paint that were discarded on the trail. So it's garbage. We picked it up. Then there was pictures on the trees. We took all the pictures down. Anything garbage that was strewn, we picked up. We were about halfway to the road, and we ran into 4 young ladies. And we had a suspicion they might be with the other 3. So we stopped, talked to them, asked them if their friends were indeed in front of us. And they said, oh, yeah, they are. And we said, this is a national trail, and your friends are vandalizing the national trail. And, so we expressed how this, detrimental this was to the outdoors, and that this land is yours. It's ours. It's everybody's. Sure. And you don't vandalize it or deface it. And we pretty much commanded them to text them or call them and tell them to cease with the damage. And also any garbage we might have missed for them to pick up. We got out to the trailhead, and I felt the hoods of the car. There were, 2 nice cars, BMWs, and the one was really warm. So I figured, all right, that's the 4 ladies we just passed, and the other one was warm but not hot. So I took a picture of their VIN, their registration license, and I took all my pictures, my images, and I sent them to the ATC. We then went down towards Greenwood Lake, and Swede caught up with us, and he was really upset, just like we were. And he said, yeah, I did the same thing. So he sent everything to the ATC. So about 3 days later, we ran into some trail workers, and they already had heard about us through the ATC. So they asked me to share images, which I did. And then about a week after that, I think we were in Connecticut, a ranger called me and asked me for all the pertinent information, descriptions. And so we had taken notes right after that. So we had, heights and, color of eyes and hair and all that, and good physical description. So I gave it to the ranger, and she said, hopefully, I'll catch him. And I said, I really don't understand how you wouldn't, given the amount of evidence and information we gave you. And I said, if I could indulge you on what I'd like to see. And she said, sure. What would you like to see? I said, they're kids. I don't think they understood what they were doing. They were being silly. I don't think they should be arrested, but I do think we need to hold them accountable to some degree. And she's like, well, that's a good thought. And I'll let you know what happens. So I figured I'd never hear from her again. Sure. And the day that we left Monson, my phone rang and just before 100 Mile Wilderness. So I answer it, and it was the ranger. And she said, I just wanted to follow up with you. We caught all the kids that were involved. Before school finished, they had an assembly, which they gave a presentation on why you don't vandalize private property, government property. You don't disrupt nature. And then the next weekend, they went out and they cleaned up all the graffiti.
That's cool. You know what? That did them a lot of good as well, as happens.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And the thing is, they weren't fined. They cleaned up, and it was a lesson learned. Unfortunately, nature took the hit, but like the ranger said, they'll never vandalize anything again in their lives. I mean, it's a message that they learned.
I'm sure.
And it's sad to know that they didn't think, that was wrong to start with.
But you know what, though? Doesn't it feel so personal? It's interesting you were saying you were all offended by it. Everything that happens on the trail feels so personal to us, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah,
It really does. Now, the last 2 questions are just silly-ish ones, I guess.
Okay.
How many rolls of toilet paper did you go through on your hike, and how in the world did you do it? That was all
no shit, right? So I think it was maybe a roll and a half. And so, before the trail, my hiking buddy in Florida, who's a little older than me, had given me some advice. He said, you ought to take Metamucil. And I'm like, I'm offended by that. Why would I take that? And he's like, well, it's good to lower cholesterol, but also make you regular. I'm like, I am regular. He's like, yeah, but I mean, like one little piece of toilet paper regular. Like, you're so clean that, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So I did a little research on it, and I found out that a lot of ultra athletes do it. Marathon runners do it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so I'm like, all right, I'll give it a try. I mean, I'll try it. And it was miraculous. Like, when you go and you're done. And like you really need one piece of toilet paper. And it's good for you. It's fiber, it's healthy.
I was nowhere near where I thought that one was going.
So here's the benefit, right? So you're not going to use a lot of toilet paper. So that's good for the environment. Yeah. No monkey butt on the trail. And that in itself is the reason to do it.
Another winner.
Yeah, winner.
Oh, dear. and perhaps might have been associated with the same thing. Which was better, New York creameries or Connecticut delis?
Ooh, I'm a sucker for ice cream, so I got to go with the creamery.
Oh, the Belleville Creamery. I just absolutely love it.
Yeah, the banana split.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah, I too.
Yeah, and they make their own ice cream, and it was just amazing. It was amazing.
Well, look, you were clearly very, very loved by your friends, and you still are very loved by your friends. I'm really pleased that we got the chance to do this. I'm glad you won the books, and I'm going to put a picture of you with those books in the show notes as well.
Right.
And thanks for coming and talk to me.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Good to talk to you. Take it easy.
Yep.
Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
So he retired to have adventures. What a great goal. And what about all that physical preparation? I was exhausted just listening to him. But for a guy in his 50s, he was certainly no slouch, was he? And to hear him intentionally trying to connect better with younger people, well, I thought that was really quite telling and quite touching. My usual thanks today go once more to those of you who have stepped up with a donation to the shows on the network. We're starting a new website soon with an obvious donation button. But until then, you can still donate on the podcast page at mightyblueontheat.com. Thanks so much once more. Just before we move on, I thought I'd point you in the direction of what I believe to be the very, very best interview the Hiking Radio Network has ever brought out. And it wasn't by me. Anna Huthmaker of the Trail Danes podcast had often spoken to Black or African American hikers and asked them to come on a show and talk about what it's like to hike while Black. She had always been turned down, and I totally understand and respect why. However, in light of recent events and some of the cultural changes that appear to be happening in our country, a lady called Elle Miller stepped forward and shared her story. It is visceral, emotional, and at several points I found myself saying, "What? You're kidding?" I'm never going to fully get what Elle has had to go through, but I highly recommend that you go and listen to her before judging. It is a spellbinding interview, and Anna is quite brilliant in that she leaves silences that only Elle can fill. I'm going to put a link in the show notes and hope that some of you take the time to live, if only for a short time, in somebody else's shoes. Now let's hear from Phoenix and the toll that the trail is starting to have on her. Well, we're on with Phoenix again. Hi, Phoenix. How are you?
I'm great, Steve. How are you?
I'm all right.
I'm hot as hell, but
yes,
we're
yes.
sort of. It was like 90 degrees today, and it turned into a pretty short hike day.
And you also, and you've just told me before we actually, as it were, came on the air, you said that you're at the Stewart Hollow Brook Shelter, is it?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Well, not at the shelter. We're at the campsite.
Sorry, you're right.
To the river.
That's right. There is a campsite, yeah. And the walk along the Housatonic follows an incredible climb down, doesn't it?
Oh, it sure did. Are you referring to St. John's Ledges?
Yes. What was that like for you?
It was just get the gun and shoot me.
So you really enjoyed it.
Shoot me. Oh, I just loved it. You know, it is absolutely covered in bits and pieces of leaves that have been so turned into a powder. So when you step on them, it is akin to being on skis in snow.
Helpful.
So
Very
you
helpful.
have, yeah. so you have this massive climb down. They're giant steps, basically. Not steps. It was bouldering. It was everything.
Yeah, you really have to let yourself down. You sort of let yourself down, don't you, really?
Well, I did a lot of fanny scooting.
Yes.
I had no pride. It was like, okay, this is where my fanny goes. This is where my legs go. Next, fanny, legs, fanny, legs. Yep. I have, I broke my arm on a rock ledge. So yeah, no, I'm very careful around those things. The leaves just made it brutal, and there was no wind, and at that point it was 88 degrees.
Yeah.
Otherwise, yeah, there were ups and downs, but they were fine. I mean, it just took it slowly because it was hot. But coming down that ledge was pure insanity.
I remember the height of summer when we were out there, thinking back to how cold it had been when we started in February, and the two of us were often thinking, oh my gosh, I wish it was as cold as it was then. I think actually hiking in heat is probably worse than hiking in cold, don't you?
I do. I do. I mean, every ounce that I drank, I sweated out. There was no point in stopping to take a leak because I was just sweating it all out. There was just, it was kind of one of those days. So as we were walking along the river, Luna wanted to put her feet in, and I realized that there was a campsite. I had hoped it was on the river,
right,
so that it would be nice and breezy, because the bugs we've had to wear our buffs over our faces and glasses and hats. So that adds to the heat index significantly, because the gnats, the mosquitoes, and the flies have been significant. They were worse here than they were in New York.
Right. Well,
yeah.
so you're not having a fabulous time right now, are you? Because you didn't enjoy New York at all, did you? So you sent me a text the other day that you said New York is not my favorite state, which I presume means it's far less than your favorite state, isn't it?
Yes. It was tough. It was tough. I'll grant you that. And it had its moments.
Yeah. Well, I seem to remember Connecticut being easier in 2014 than it was in 2019. I found it far tougher than I was expecting it to. So, but I enjoyed it. I loved being in Connecticut. I thought it was a great hike. And you also feel you're getting up into those New England states now, aren't you?
Yes, you do get that sense. When we went into Kent, well, actually, this was kind of a weird thing. We were at Algo shelter 2 nights ago, and I had taken a spill. You know those the boards that they put over bogs?
Oh, yeah.
I know it
well.
Yeah, well, yeah. They're really secure, unless they're broken, but they're secure.
Yeah.
And so Luna stepped at the end of the board on the right side, and when it was my turn, I stepped at the end of the board on the left side. Well, it turns out it was just resting on a round rock.
Oh,
so
gosh.
It pitched me and all of me into the hard-packed mud and kind of caught my IT band. So, we kind of crawled into Algo shelter, and the next day it was hot, and it was one of those days where I swear it's probably the closest I've come to saying I just can't. I can't have my IT band on my left side hurting and the right foot finally getting better to go through it all over again. So we decided to go into Kent and have breakfast and do laundry. And because there's a hiker shower, we wanted to go shower.
Nice.
So we thought, well, we're going to do that and have a short day. So we get into Kent. We have a fantastic Eggs Benedict breakfast, yum, yum, yum,
yep,
at the village, whatever it was. And we head to the showers, and they're not working.
Oh,
like,
no.
We're like, oh, geez, Stinky Winky's here. We really want to shower. So we wanted to get to the laundromat and asked a guy who was walking his dog the quickest way, and he directed us. And he said, well, the hiker showers. We're like, yeah, we know about the hiker showers, except for they're not working. And he said, oh, well, that's awful. I'll report it to town people tomorrow. And we're thinking, well, Happy Father's Day doesn't help us a whole lot. Okay, bye. So we're in the laundromat undressing as we're putting our stuff in the bins, and in pops this man, and with whom we had just been speaking, and he said, "Hey, you know what? I have a place right diagonally across from here, down the street. You guys are welcome to shower there."
Wow, how nice! How nice is that, eh?
Oh my, we both burst into tears. And then later he when he showed Luna the place, he then said, "Listen, if you guys want to hang out today or even spend the night, the place is yours." It was the cutest little apartment that you've ever seen. So we took a zero. Had a fantastic day. We had a one of those showers that blasts you out of the shower stall, which was wonderful. And then we resupplied and ate in the apartment and just slept soundly, got up this morning and came into the heat.
I bet you wanted to stay another day, didn't you?
I kind of wrote him a note. He's known as Saint Steve because apparently he does this occasionally for thru hikers. And so as I was writing him a note, I almost put down how much is a monthly rent.
Kate, that is real trail magic. That's what trail magic is. It's that serendipitous encounter, isn't it? You met somebody. You mentioned you were a thru hiker. You mentioned there were no showers, because had you had showers already, he probably wouldn't have done that. But you hadn't had showers because the showers weren't working. It just worked out.
Yep, it was so fantastic, and it is the epitome of trail magic. And I really needed, as it turned out, I needed the day off, and I think Luna needed the day off as well. So it reinvigorated my spirit and had me make certain mental adjustments, and forward we go. Well,
have you been struggling the last few days then?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah? Yeah. And is that because you're finding it hotter, or it's just, you're not actually enjoying it that much?
To a degree, it is that. I don't find much of it inspiring. I'm a very visual person,
right?
And looking at the ground, there's just so much gray, brown, and green that it isn't very inspiring. And when you talk to the thru hikers, as a number of them had a big problem in New York. They just hated it, and. Wow. But they kept saying, but we had Maxi Bald, we had the Shenandoahs and the Smokies, and we had all those beautiful things and McAfee's Knob in our minds. So we can get through this because now we're off to the whites,
Yes, that's right.
But, from my point of view, I started in the middle in the
that's true.
That people try to just get through.
That's interesting. Isn't that interesting? I think they're right as well. You have these wonderful experiences further down south. Even just getting out of Georgia's an exciting thing. To get through Georgia's great, and then Hot Springs and Damascus and places like that. They're just great little towns to visit, and you haven't had that really, have you? So, but do you think that day off? Think that day off helped your mindset then?
Yes, it did. It did. I mean, I was well aware that I was starting in the least inspiring states, the states that everyone just wants to get through. Mm-hmm. But the impact, knowing it intellectually, but living it emotionally is quite another thing. So
it is an emotion. This is an emotional trip anyway, isn't it? You knew it would be that as well. It is for everybody, I think. Your emotions get tested all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
well, absolutely. Yeah. And of course I have my daughter, Alexa, who thru hiked it in 2017. So she kind of, talked me off the ledge, if you will. Ooh, that's a bad analogy out here.
Yes, you do not want to be talked off the ledge. You're right. So tell us, I don't want to intrude, but tell us about Luna. Where is she from? Is she somebody that you seem to be just getting well with? Obviously, you've done 400 miles with her, haven't you?
No, she started in New Jersey, so
New Jersey.
at the Delaware Water Gap.
All right, okay.
So that's where we met. So, but we've been together about 2 weeks now.
Right.
And she's delightful. She's from Morristown, New Jersey.
Uh-huh.
And she's a lovely woman. She has a lot of hiking experience. So she's an inspiration in that regard.
And has she helped with the way you felt the last few days as well?
Yes, because there are days when she's not having the best day and I'm doing okay. And
Sure.
if I'm not having a great day and she is, it helps balance. It's not so hot if neither one of us are having a great day.
Yes.
But it's also nice to hike with a woman because you don't worry about certain things that you do when you're hiking in mixed gender groups.
Yeah. So what's her plan then? Is she going to go to Katahdin and then go back to New Jersey and go south, or what's she going to do? Well,
she actually has done everything but a small bit of, I think, Pennsylvania, teeny bit of Pennsylvania. So she's done after she does Katahdin, she will have pretty much done Harper's Ferry through to Katahdin.
Oh, right.
So then she's going to do Harper's Ferry to Springer.
You're doing that in reverse, aren't you? Aren't you going Springer up to Harper's?
I'm planning on that. It depends, because the other chap that I was hiking with onward is also going to do Harper's Ferry Springer. Right. So if, and we're all in the same vicinity, so if it winds up that we all get to Katahdin within a similar time frame, I may just go south.
Yeah.
Instead of, I'm not wedded to any particular. I mean, I would have preferred if I could have done my original plan, which was West Virginia, Springer, Katahdin, West Virginia, but that didn't happen. I'm just going with
the flow.
Trying to go with the flow.
Yeah.
And COVID doesn't seem to be anything here. We've been served. It's not that it isn't anything. They are doing table service. Everyone does wear masks, but obviously not when you eat.
Right.
And you are expected to wear it in stores and stuff. But it does seem much more relaxed. Isn't
the trail open officially anyway, pretty much all the way up the trail apart from Baxter, isn't it?
Oh, I have no idea. I honestly, there was no TV in the room yesterday. I haven't seen news since Delaware Water Gap. I have no idea what's going on in the world.
Good. Don't look at it then. Stay away from it. You just don't need to. Yeah, you don't need to. Okay. Well, look, I'm glad you're kind of recovering from. You say physically you're getting better. That mental thing, as you know, is one of the most important things. So I hope you can get your head around the fact that this is going to get more and more exciting now as time goes on, as the mountains start coming back, and hopefully you're going to start enjoying it a little bit more as well.
Oh, you and me both. Otherwise, it'll just be it'll be what it'll be. But yeah, you and me both. What can I say?
Exactly. It'll come to you. It'll come to you, and hopefully that with Luna, you've got a good person to hike with, and you're probably going to enjoy it a little bit more than you perhaps otherwise would if you were now by yourself all the time. So I think that hopefully that's been quite helpful for you. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and she's a kick. She's a total kick. So.
Oh, is she?
She's a total kick. So we laugh a lot. So that's good.
That always helps. All right, Kate. Well, look, good luck. Keep it going, and I'll catch up with you soon, all right?
You betcha. Okay.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
I think that after our chat, Kate felt the need to text me about all the good things that she's taken from the trail. So I hope that sending me that text, and it was very extensive, has reminded her of everything that she's achieved and experienced so far, and everything that she has to look forward to. I was pretty sure that she was hitting a rough spot in recent days, and, well, she's just told us about it, hasn't she? This is such an up and down, emotional roller coaster that I'm sure we all have those moments from time to time. Completing the trail takes much more than simply walking 15, 20, or even 30 miles a day. It takes a mindset that when you have these crappy days, or even crappy weeks, you have the strength of purpose to push on through. Just before we get to Grandma Gatewood, I wanted to remind you of the Hike for H2O challenge that I'm doing. We heard from Corey Strathmire last week, and I signed up for the challenge and challenged myself to walk 45 miles during this week. Believe me, 45 miles in a week in Florida in June is an absolute mission. I got out this morning just after 6 a.m. It was still dark and it was 81 degrees. So far, since Sunday, and it's Wednesday as I put this together, I'm at 30.06 miles in just 4 days. Not too bad for an old git, eh? Thanks to those of you who have supported the charity. It is truly worthwhile. Finally today, we're winding down from Grandma Gatewood's epic hike and the aftermath. Funnily enough, my guest next week is going to be Keith Foskett, or Fozzie, and I'll be reading Fozzie's book after this great one. I hope that you've enjoyed hearing about Emma Gatewood, because you know how much I enjoy telling you about all these strong women. I love them. I'll see you next week. Chapter 17. Aloneness more complete than ever. September the 26th to October the 9th, 1955. She was a portrait of proper. Her iron-grey hair was clean and combed and pulled back. She wore a soft white blouse, red round suit, and medium-heeled black shoes. I decided to look a bit more presentable on the way back, Emma told Mrs. Dean Chase, the reporter with the United Press. You know, it feels kind of good to get back into civilised clothes. She was the talk of the country. The headlines ran in newspapers everywhere. Mrs. Gatewood completes hike. Grandma plans New York visit as hike ends. Granny tired. Earl Schaefer's hike had prompted a few newspaper stories and the article in the National Geographic that inspired Emma. Jean Espy's hike a year later made local papers. The attention Emma received was unprecedented. A jovial little grandmother who lost 30 pounds in a trek along the Appalachian Trail said today that she has had all the walking I've wanted for a long time, read a story in the Baltimore Sun. New Hampshire, she said, was the toughest part of the journey. Maine offered a few serious obstacles where there were blowdowns of trees along the trail. Several times Mrs. Gatewood fell and strained an ankle or knee, slowing her. There has been frost every morning of the last week, but Mrs. Gatewood said she found shelter and at least one good meal daily at sportsmen's camps. There is a little snow on the mountain. She was called sprightly, robust, doughty, determined, straight-laced and old-fashioned, strong, frail-looking, and surprisingly tall. According to the journalists, she reported feeling in tip-top shape and ready to walk another 1,000 miles. She was in a good mood, she said, because this was the first morning that she didn't get up at 6 o'clock and have to climb a mountain. She calculated that she had spent about $200 on the trail, at roughly 10 cents a mile. She sent her glasses with Mary Snow to have them fixed and fitted with new lenses. The president of the Millinocket Chamber of Commerce gave her a tour of the nearby paper mill and treated her to lunch at the Great Northern Hotel. That afternoon he drove her back to the chamber, where a group of businessmen and dignitaries had gathered. They presented Emma with a large picture of Mount Katahdin. She posed for photographs in a potato field and fetched her required glasses from the ophthalmologist and had a steak dinner with Mary Snow on the train to Bangor, courtesy of the Bangor and Aroostook Railroad, where she scratched out a postcard, addressed it to a Roman Catholic parish in Harlem, and dropped it in the mail, still unaware that she'd stayed the night with the leaders of two rival street gangs. "I made it," she wrote. "Remember me to all those young men I owe my life to. Please tell them they are welcome to come visit me any time, as also are you. Love, Emma." Over the next 4 days, Mary Snow gave Emma a tour of New York City, of the Empire State Building, Chinatown and the Wharf, as swarms of urbanites buzzed around them. It was a city she had only known before through the newspaper columns of Gallipolis native son O.O. McIntyre. He called his daily dispatch the Letter, and his stories often had the feel of a postcard to the folks back home. He wrote of the telescope man on the curb, the Bowery lodging houses, the drifters, chorus girls, gunmen, the speakeasies on side streets, fake jewellery auction sales, chop houses, antique shops, cafeterias. Now Emma took it all in with her own eyes. When it was time for her to go, Snow drove her to LaGuardia Airport and put her on a plane for home. She was carrying her walking stick, as always, and as she boarded the plane, the other passengers and crew kept trying to assist her, as if she were crippled. Going back to the rolling hills of southern Ohio was like a victory tour, as Emma visited family, received phone calls from well-wishing friends, met a 7-month-old great-grandchild for the first time, and gave interviews to the reporters who had learned of her return. She said the people she met on the trail were extra nice, all but the snooty woman who turned her away and the boy who called her a lady tramp. "I thought it would be fun to walk the trail, but I soon found that it was anything but that," she told one reporter. She explained how she had blown through 7 pairs of shoes, 4 cloth-topped, 2 made of leather, the last a pair of sneakers, and used a total of 5 rolls of adhesive tape, mostly for ankle support. She mentioned how bad the bugs were and explained how she had fixed sassafras leaves in their band of a sunshade dangling over her ears to keep the pests off. I didn't get started sooner, she said, because when you're raising a family of 11, you can't just run off when you want to. I got to the point where I had time, and I decided, that'll be a nice lark for me. When a reporter from Baltimore called her a celebrity, she responded, I wish you people had stopped calling me names. Was she afraid? If I'd been afraid, she said, I never would have started out in the first place. It was as though she was made for the moment. I slept wherever I could pile down, she told the local paper. Of course, sometimes they weren't the most desirable places in the world, but I always managed. A pile of leaves makes a fine bed, and if you're tired enough, mountain tops, abandoned sheds, porches and overturned boats can be tolerated. I even had a sleeping companion. A porcupine tried to curl up next to me one night while I slept on a cabin floor. I decided there wasn't room for both of us. Though there were a lot of times I had to parcel out my food to make it last, I didn't have to break any laws to get it. And when it didn't last, well, I've eaten many a wild berry and chewed on many a sassafras, wintergreen, peppermint and spearmint leaf. What the Lord didn't provide, I did. One day, I was walking down the road and came upon a tin can. I turned it over a couple of times with the tip of my cane and found a full, unopened can of beef stew. Opened it with my knife and dined real well that night. She said the trip was the most valuable summer of her life. It took me a long time to get to the top, she said, and when I did, I signed my name on the register. I never felt so alone in my life. The grown-up Gatewood children were alarmingly unsurprised that their mother had spent nearly 5 months in the woods, with rattlesnakes and street gangs, on a mile-high mountain with a sprained ankle and broken glasses. Maybe it's their stock. We didn't worry about her because she always took care of herself, Lucy told me, and she taught us to take care of ourselves. I didn't know where she was or what she was doing, said Nelson, and that was normal. Some people say, weren't you worried? Said Louise. I said, no, we weren't worried. She knew what she was doing, and if that's what she wanted to do, more power to her. She was just a normal person, said Nelson, nothing extra. We didn't know that she'd become a kind of celebrity until later, said Rowena. When she came off the trail, she called from Huntington, West Virginia, said Charles Gatewood, Monroe's son and Emma's grandson. She said, come get me. Dad said, you've walked all the way, surely you can walk the rest of the way to the Gallipolis. You know, it wasn't that impressive to me when she walked the Appalachian Trail the first time, said her cousin Tommy Jones, who still lives in the family's old homestead on the Ohio River. I think she was 67, right? Well, I knew how strong she was physically and how she liked outdoors living, so for her, I didn't think that was anything exceptional. Maybe she didn't either. Her celebrity rising, Emma was quickly summoned back to New York to appear on NBC's Today with Dave Garroway, where she was the featured guest. She walked in range of the cameras from a side door, wearing blue jeans, a checkered jacket and tennis shoes, and she carried her old sack. In place of her eye shade, she wore a dark beret. She told Garroway and a nationwide audience that she could have walked another 1,000 miles beyond Katahdin, if necessary. Garroway asked her why she made the long walk. She said she had always strolled through the hills for pleasure, and when she read the Rosea magazine story, she just decided she'd try it. Afterwards, she went to the Empire Hotel to try out for Welcome Travellers, a confessional quiz show hosted by Smiling Jack Smith. She earned a spot and they filmed the show the following morning after several rehearsals. Emma won $200, exactly what she spent on the trail. She caught a ride on a sightseeing bus round New York and stopped at an antique store to buy Mrs. Dean Chase of Millinocket a brass ashtray in the shape of a shoe. Her next stop was Pittsburgh to visit her daughters, Rowena and Esther. She had barely touched down when the newspapers started calling. A reporter for the Pittsburgh Press asked about her plans for the future. That's the secret, she said, but if I go for another hike, I'll let my family know like I did the last time, with postcards. She told them all the same thing. Nobody, she said, is going to get out of me what's going through my head on that score. She wouldn't say no, but she was already thinking about the trail again. On June 25, 1956, in Washington, D.C., the U.S. House of Representatives convened to handle a slate of important business, including the scheduling of a discussion of a postal rate increase and to amend the Federal Property and Administrative Services Act of 1949. Ohio Representative Thomas A. Jenkins, a Republican from Ironton, addressed Democratic Speaker of the House John William McCormick. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to extend my remarks at this point in the record, he said. Is there objection to the request of the gentleman from Ohio? McCormick asked. There wasn't. Mr. Speaker, Jenkins began. Mrs. Emma Gatewood, a resident of Gallipolis, Ohio, in our congressional district, won for herself national fame a few months ago. In spite of the fact that she was 67 years old and a great-grandmother, she hiked by herself 2,050 miles over a rugged mountainous course. She hiked the rough and rugged Appalachian Trail from Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, to the summit of mile-high Mount Katahdin in wild and rugged northeastern Maine. In performing this great undertaking, she wore out 7 pairs of shoes. She carried only a blanket and a small supply of rations. She reached this wild and rugged goal after walking for 146 days. She averaged 17 miles a day and lost 24 pounds of weight. Her accomplishment brought forth many comments from mountain people. One old and experienced Maine woodsman said of her, "We've got to hand it to her. It takes guts, pioneer guts, to do that kind of a job." Mrs. Gatewood read about the trail 3 years ago, how well marked it was that there were shelters at the end of a day's hike, but she found most of the shelters had been blown down or burned. Much of the time she slept on benches, tables and on the ground. On bitter cold nights she would heat stones to sleep on. In places the trail was little more than a path. There were sand and gravel washouts, weeds and brush up to her neck, but she would not quit. She inched her way over great ledges of shelf rock made slick with sleet, waded across 30-foot wide mountain streams, whacked with a cane at dense underbrush. She is not afraid of forest animals, although a rattlesnake struck but just got her dungarees. Mrs. Gatewood is the only woman who ever accomplished this feat. At the top of Mount Katahdin she signed the register and sang America the Beautiful. In her own words, she was just walking the trail for pleasure, for the love of out of doors, for the lovely works our Maker displays on forest floors. In an editorial, the Boston Post states that Mrs. Emma Gatewood of Ohio demonstrated that the hardihood of pioneer women survives today. The Millinocket, Maine Chamber of Commerce presented her with a framed picture of Mount Katahdin when she was its guest. She was also awarded a trophy and a life membership in the National Hikers and Campers Association. Mrs. Gatewood is a relative of O.O. McIntyre, famed New York columnist, whose syndicated columns covering the United States helped make the city of Gallipolis, Ohio, famous. By the wonderful performance, Mrs. Emma Gatewood has achieved for herself a place with the heroes of the country.